Clara Hensley once believed family was her anchor, that surrendering everything for them was the noblest gift she could give. She had walked away from her dream job at XAI, abandoned those late nights unraveling the future alongside Elon Musk, all to see her brother Travis rise and her mother Dorothy hold her head high once more. She'd convinced herself that love would be her reward, that the sleepless nights, the buried ambitions, the quiet pride in their gratitude would sustain her. But on March 31st, 2025, as she stood in a San Francisco courtroom, watching Travis smirk across the aisle like she was nothing more than a smudge on his polished life, the truth crashed over her like a wave. She had been their stepping stone, a tool to wield and discard. And now, a secret they'd buried deep was clawing its way out, threatening to shatter everything she'd ever known. At 39, Clara Hensley had once been a rising star at XAI, Elon Musk's audacious AI venture. 2 years ago, she'd been a data analyst with a rare gift, sifting through terabytes of raw information to uncover patterns others missed, threading clarity through chaos. She wasn't merely good, she was exceptional, a quiet force in the humming labs of Silicon Valley. Elon himself had taken notice. In the fall of 2022, during a late-night review of a neural network breakthrough, he'd peered at her screen, nodded curtly and muttered, "Clara, you're the kind of mind that keeps this place breathing." His gruff praise, rare and unpolished, had lodged itself in her memory like a badge of honor. She thrived in that world, the buzz of servers, the thrill of pushing boundaries. But she'd given it all up, not for ambition or greed, but for family, for Travis, for Dorothy, and now the cost of that choice burned in her chest like a live coal. It had all begun in the spring of 2023, when Travis Hensley burst into Clara's modest Palo Alto apartment with a gleam in his eye and a plan on his lips. 6 years her junior, Travis was the golden child of the Hensley family, charming, reckless, armed with a smile that could disarm a room and a swagger that promised the impossible. But stability eluded him. He'd flunked out of Stanford after 2 semesters, flitted through a string of failed startups, and left behind debts that Dorothy quietly erased with a sigh and a checkbook. So when he paced Clara's living room that April evening, his voice crackling with urgency, she should have seen the warning signs. She should have turned him away. But she didn't. "Clara, this is it," he'd declared, his hands slicing the air as if carving out his future. "Hensley Ventures, an investment firm for AI startups. We get in early, back the next unicorns, make millions. With your connections at XAI, we'd have the inside track. I just need your help to get it rolling." Clara's stomach had twisted as she listened, her coffee growing cold in her hands. She'd wanted to tell him no, to say her life at XAI wasn't a bargaining chip for his dreams. But then she'd thought of Dorothy, her mother, 63 at the time, her hands trembling more each year since their father's death a decade earlier. Dorothy had always insisted Travis was destined for greatness, that he just needed a push, a chance to prove himself. And Clara? She was the steady one, the reliable daughter who didn't need hand-holding, who could shoulder anything. So she'd swallowed her doubts, buried them deep, and agreed. By summer, she'd resigned from XAI, cashed out her modest stock options, and poured everything into Travis's vision, her expertise, her savings, her network. She'd even leveraged her reputation to secure him a meeting with mid-level XAI executives, trading on years of goodwill. Hensley Ventures launched by December, a sleek operation with a glass-walled office in Menlo Park and Travis's name emblazoned in bold. For a while, it seemed worth it. Travis thrived, his confidence swelling. At Thanksgiving, Dorothy had squeezed Clara's hand, whispering, "You're such a good sister." Clara had clung to that moment, telling herself it was enough. But it wasn't. By early 2025, the cracks began to show, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Travis stopped seeking her advice, dismissing her with a casual wave and a, "I've got this, Clara." Meetings she'd orchestrated became his triumphs, his new hires, Silicon Valley sharks with gelled hair and tailored suits, treating her like a relic from a bygone era. Whispers reached her ears. Hensley Ventures was negotiating deals she hadn't approved, deals that brushed too close to XAI's proprietary tech. In February, she confronted Travis in his corner office, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a glittering view of the bay. He'd leaned back in his chair, grinning like a king on a throne, unshaken by her anger. "Relax, Clara," he'd said, his voice smooth and slippery. "You're not cut out for this game. Let me handle it. You did your part. Now enjoy the ride." "Enjoy the ride," she'd snapped, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "I built this with you, Travis. What's going on with these deals? They're too close to XAI's work." He'd laughed, a sharp, cutting sound that made her skin prickle. "You're paranoid. Go home, get some sleep. You look like hell." She should have pressed harder, dug deeper into the shadows he cast, but she trusted him, trusted family, and that trust became her undoing. On March 10th, a subpoena arrived in her mailbox like a thunderclap, shattering the fragile peace she'd clung to. XAI was suing Hensley Ventures for intellectual property theft, alleging Travis had stolen proprietary AI algorithms and attempted to sell them to a Chinese competitor. And Clara's name was splashed across the lawsuit as a co-founder, an accomplice to his crimes. She'd never signed a document, never consented to any of it. But there it was in stark black ink. Clara Hensley, defendant. The betrayal struck her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. That night, she called Travis, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped the phone. "What the hell did you do, Travis?" she shouted, pacing her apartment's worn hardwood floor. "Why's my name on this?" His voice came through cold and clipped like she was a stranger interrupting his day. "You wanted to help, didn't you? This is how it works, Clara. You're in it now, so deal with it." "Deal with it?" she yelled, her voice breaking under the weight of her fury. "You used me. You dragged me into your mess." "You dragged yourself," he retorted, venom seeping into every syllable. "If you hadn't been so desperate to play the martyr, you'd still be kissing Elon's boots at XAI. Don't blame me for your choices." The line went dead as she slammed the phone down, her chest heaving, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. The next morning, she turned to Dorothy, hoping her mother would see the truth, stand by her side. But Dorothy's voice over the phone was heavy, tinged with that familiar disappointment Clara had borne since childhood. "Clara, don't make this harder than it needs to be," Dorothy said, sighing as if exhausted by her daughter's defiance. "Travis is under a lot of pressure. You should support him, not tear him down." "Support him?" Clara choked out, incredulous. "He's ruining me, Mom. He's lying, stealing, and I'm the one paying for it." "He's your brother," Dorothy replied, her tone final, as if that settled everything. "Family sticks together." The call ended with a click, leaving Clara in a silence that rang with betrayal. Family sticks together, except when it didn't, except when she was the one bleeding for it. She felt like she was sinking, the people she'd anchored her life to slipping away like smoke, but she wasn't ready to drown. Not yet. She dialed Maya Torres, her college roommate turned fierce lawyer, the one person who'd never fallen for Travis's charm. Maya answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and alert. "Clara, what's wrong? You sound like hell." "Everything's wrong," Clara said, her throat tight with desperation. "Travis screwed me over. XAI's suing us, him, and my name's on it. I need help." "Say no more," Maya replied, no hesitation in her tone. "I'm on it. We're not just clearing your name, we're burning this bastard down." That resolve carried Clara to today, March 31st, where she stood in a packed San Francisco courtroom, the air thick with tension and the faint buzz of anticipation. Reporters crowded the back rows, their cameras poised like vultures, waiting for Elon Musk to take the stand. Clara sat at the defendant's table beside Maya, her palms slick with sweat, her heart pounding against her ribs. Across the aisle, Travis whispered to his overpriced lawyers, his smirk a permanent fixture, unshaken by the storm brewing around him. Dorothy sat in the gallery, her lips pursed, her eyes fixed on the floor, anywhere but her daughter. Clara felt invisible, a shadow in her own unraveling tale. The judge's gavel cracked against the wood, silencing the murmurs, and Elon Musk stepped forward. He was older than Clara remembered, grayer at the temples, lines etched deeper around his eyes, but that intensity, that razor-sharp focus, remained unbroken. He began detailing the stolen tech, laying out dates and specifics with surgical precision. Clara's mind drifted, tangled in Travis's betrayal, until Elon's voice snapped her back to the present. "We have evidence," he said, his words cutting through the room like a blade, "that Hensley Ventures didn't just steal from XAI, they exploited one of our own. Clara Hensley was no accomplice, she was a target. And there's more. A recording, submitted last week, that reveals something personal." The courtroom erupted in a low rumble of shock. Maya gripped Clara's arm, her nails biting into her skin. "What recording?" she hissed under her breath. Clara shook her head, her mouth dry. She had no idea. Travis's smirk flickered, a flash of unease crossing his face, and Clara caught it. Fear. Elon nodded to the clerk and a speaker crackled to life. Travis's voice filled the room, smug and unmistakable from a call Clara had never heard. "Clara's the perfect pawn," he said, a chuckle punctuating his words. "She got me in with Musk and she doesn't even know the half of it. Mom's kept her clueless about who she really is. Makes her easier to control." The words landed like a thunderbolt, freezing Clara in her seat. Who she really is. Her breath hitched, her eyes darting to Dorothy. Her mother's face had drained of color, her hands trembling in her lap, her gaze still avoiding Clara's. The judge banged his gavel, but the sound barely pierced the roar in Clara's ears. Something was wrong. Something bigger than the lawsuit. Bigger than Travis's lies. As the recording cut off, Clara realized this wasn't just about stolen tech anymore. It was about a secret her family had buried her entire life, and it was breaking free, ready or not. The courtroom doors swung shut behind Clara Hensley as she stumbled out into the cool San Francisco air, the echo of Travis's recorded voice still ringing in her ears. "She doesn't even know who she really is." The words had lodged themselves in her chest like shrapnel, sharp and unrelenting, tearing at the fragile threads of trust she'd clung to for years. She'd stood there, frozen, as the judge called a recess, the gallery erupting into whispers and the press swarming like flies. Maya Torres, her lawyer and lifeline, had pulled her aside, her dark eyes blazing with determination. "We need that recording," Maya had said, her voice low and urgent. "Whatever Travis meant, it's our leverage. We're going to bury him." Clara had nodded, her throat too tight to speak, but her mind was already racing. Leverage? This wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. It was personal, a wound deeper than stolen tech or courtroom battles. Travis's smirk, Dorothy's trembling hands, the way they'd both avoided her gaze, it all pointed to something bigger, something they'd hidden from her for 39 years. She couldn't wait for the next hearing, couldn't sit idly by while the truth dangled just out of reach. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Maya had seen the fire flicker in Clara's eyes. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her tone wary but curious. "I'm thinking Travis knows more than he's letting on," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "He's the one who said it. He's the key. I'm going to make him talk." Maya raised an eyebrow, exhaling a sharp breath. "You think he'll just spill? He's a snake, Clara. He'll twist everything unless we trap him." "Then we trap him," Clara said, her resolve hardening like steel. "Tonight." The plan formed quickly, fueled by desperation and a growing fury Clara could no longer suppress. Maya agreed to dig into the legal side, subpoenaing the full recording from XAI, cross-checking Hensley Ventures' filings, while Clara took a more direct approach. She knew Travis better than anyone. His habits, his arrogance, the way he'd let his guard down when he thought he'd won. If there was truth to be had, she'd pry it from him herself. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Silicon Valley in a wash of orange and shadow, Clara drove to Hensley Ventures' headquarters in Menlo Park. The building stood like a monument to Travis's ego, glass and steel, its sleek lines glowing against the dusk. She'd helped choose this place, negotiated the lease back when she still believed in their partnership. Now it loomed like a fortress, its polished facade mocking her. She parked a block away, her heart pounding as she slipped on a dark hoodie and tucked her hair beneath it. Security was lax after hours, just a single guard who barely glanced at her as she flashed an old badge she'd kept from the early days. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless, each ding amplifying the pulse in her ears. She didn't have a detailed strategy beyond getting inside, but she'd spent years analyzing data, finding patterns in the noise. She could handle Travis. She had to. The door to his office was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. Clara pushed it open without knocking, her breath catching as she saw him. Travis, leaning back in his leather chair, a glass of whiskey in one hand, his phone in the other. He didn't look up at first, too absorbed in whatever he was scrolling through, his smirk as fixed as ever. "Well, well," he drawled finally, his eyes flicking to her with lazy amusement. "The prodigal sister returns. Come to grovel." "No," Clara said, stepping inside and slamming the door shut behind her. The sound echoed, sharp and final. "I came for the truth. What did you mean in that recording? Who I really am? What the hell was that?" Travis's smirk faltered for a split second, a crack in his armor before he recovered with a scoff. "You're overreacting, Clara. It was just talk. Business bullshit to impress some investors. You know how it goes." "Bullshit?" She took a step closer, her fists clenched at her sides. "You dragged my name into a lawsuit, stole from XAI, and now you're hinting at some secret about me. I'm not here for games, Travis. Tell me what you know." He set the whiskey down with a deliberate clink, standing to meet her gaze. At 6'2", he towered over her, but Clara didn't flinch. "You want the truth?" he said, his voice low and mocking. "Fine. You're not as smart as you think. You've been running around playing savior, but you're clueless. Ask Mom. She's the one who's been lying to you your whole life." "Stop deflecting," Clara snapped, her voice rising with a fury she could no longer contain. "You said it. You knew something. What is it?" Travis laughed, a cold, jagged sound that sliced through the room. "Oh, Clara. You're so desperate to be the hero. You really think Mom's going to back you up in court? She'd sell you out in a heartbeat to save me, and she already has, years ago." Her breath caught, a chill creeping up her spine. "What are you talking about?" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper, his breath sour with whiskey. "You're not her daughter, Clara. You're not even Dad's. You're some dirty little secret she buried to keep the family intact. I found out when I was 16. Overheard her arguing with some lawyer about a trust fund. Your real dad? He was one of Musk's old buddies at XAI. Dead now, but he left you something. Mom made sure you'd never see it." The room tilted beneath Clara's feet. She gripped the edge of his desk, her knees buckling as the words sank in. "You're lying," she said, but her voice wavered, hollowed out by doubt. His eyes, those cruel, gleeful eyes, told her he wasn't. "Am I?" he taunted, stepping back with a shrug. "Go ask her. See if she denies it. Or better yet, check the safe in her study. She keeps everything there, papers, letters, proof." Clara's mind reeled, a storm of disbelief and rage crashing through her. Her whole life, every sacrifice, every moment she'd spent trying to earn their love, felt like a house of cards collapsing. If Travis was telling the truth, Dorothy had known all along. She'd let Clara destroy herself for a family that wasn't even hers. The betrayal burned, a white-hot ember in her chest, but she refused to let him see her break. "Get out," Travis said, sitting back down as if the conversation were trivial. "You're done here." Clara didn't argue. She turned and left, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall as she stormed back to her car. Her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel, driving toward Dorothy's house in Atherton, 30 minutes away. The safe, if there was proof, it'd be there. She didn't call ahead, didn't give Dorothy time to weave another lie. She needed the raw, unfiltered truth, and she'd tear it out of that house if she had to. Dorothy's home was quiet when Clara arrived, the porch light flickering in the night breeze. She let herself in with the spare key under the mat, her pulse racing as she crossed the hardwood floor. Dorothy was in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, her face etched with exhaustion. She startled at the sight of Clara, the glass nearly slipping from her fingers. "Clara?" Dorothy's voice trembled, her eyes wide. "What are you doing here so late?" Clara didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Travis told me everything," she said, her tone cold and unyielding. "About my real dad, about the lies. Is it true?" Dorothy's face crumpled, the wine glass trembling as she set it down. "Clara, Is it true?" Clara shouted, her voice cracking with the weight of years unspoken. Dorothy's shoulders slumped, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible. "It's true." The admission hit Clara like a punch, knocking the air from her lungs. She stumbled back, her chest tight with a mix of fury and grief. "Who was he?" she demanded. "Why didn't you tell me?" "His name was Daniel Pierce," Dorothy said, her voice shaking as she wiped at her tears. "He worked with Elon at XAI back in the early days. We had an affair. When I got pregnant, your father, Richard, agreed to raise you as his own. Daniel died in a car accident before you were born. I thought it was better this way." "Better for who?" Clara's voice rose, raw and jagged. "For you, for Travis. You let me kill myself trying to please you, and you never said a word." "I was protecting you," Dorothy cried, her hands clutching the armrests of her chair. "There was money, a trust fund Daniel left. Richard didn't want you to have it. He thought it'd ruin us." "Protecting me?" Clara laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You protected your image, and Travis knew. He used it against me." Dorothy didn't deny it. She just sat there, sobbing, as Clara stormed past her to the study. The safe was behind a painting of a serene lake, a cruel irony given the chaos it hid. Clara had seen Dorothy open it once, years ago, and remembered the code, 803-1586, the date they'd always celebrated as her birthday. The lock clicked open, and inside was a stack of papers. Legal documents, a birth certificate with Daniel Pierce's name scrawled in faded ink, and a letter in Dorothy's handwriting, pleading with an attorney to keep it quiet. Clara sank to the floor, the papers spilling around her like fallen leaves. Her real father had been a brilliant engineer, a friend of Elon Musk, and she'd never known him. Worse, her so-called family had buried him, and her, to save themselves. She clutched the birth certificate, her fingers tracing Daniel's name, a man she'd never met but whose blood ran in her veins. The betrayal was a living thing, clawing at her insides, but beneath it, a spark ignited. Anger, yes, but also determination. She pulled out her phone, her hands still trembling, and called Maya. "I've got it," she said when her friend answered, her voice steady despite the tears streaking her face. "Proof Travis knew. Proof I'm innocent. And something else. Something big." "Tell me everything," Maya said, her tone all business, ready to fight. Clara did, her words spilling out in a rush. The confrontation with Travis, the safe, the papers, Dorothy's confession. As she spoke, a plan took shape in her mind, sharp and clear. Travis thought he'd broken her, thought he could keep her in the dark forever, but he'd made a fatal mistake. Those papers, that recording, they weren't just a secret. They were weapons, and Clara intended to wield them with precision. She'd walked into that office a pawn, but she'd leave this house a player, ready to turn the game on its head. Clara Hensley sat on the floor of Dorothy's study, surrounded by the scattered papers from the safe, her breath shallow and ragged. The birth certificate with Daniel Pierce's name stared up at her, a stark confirmation of Travis's venomous words. Her mother's letter, pleading with a lawyer to bury the truth, lay crumpled in her hand, the ink blurred where her tears had fallen. Dorothy's confession still echoed in the room. Yes, it's true. The woman who'd raised her, who'd shaped her life with quiet expectations and louder silences, had built it all on a lie. Clara's world had shifted beneath her feet, but the shock was giving way to something harder, something sharper. Resolve. She wasn't just a pawn anymore. She was a force, and she'd make them pay for what they'd done. Dorothy lingered in the doorway, her sobs reduced to soft hiccups, her eyes red and pleading. "Clara, please," she whispered, her voice fragile. "Let me explain." Clara didn't look up, her fingers tightening around the papers. "You've had 39 years to explain," she said, her tone cold as steel. "I don't want your excuses now." She stood, shoving the documents into her bag, her movements swift and deliberate. Dorothy reached for her arm, but Clara jerked away, her eyes flashing with a fury she could no longer contain. "Don't," she warned, her voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to touch me after this." Dorothy shrank back, her hands falling limply to her sides. "I thought I was protecting you," she said, her words barely audible. "The trust fund. Richard said it would tear us apart. Travis. Travis used it," Clara cut in, her voice rising. "He used me, and you let him. You let me sacrifice everything for a lie." She slung the bag over her shoulder, brushing past Dorothy without a backward glance. The older woman's pleas faded into the night as Clara stormed out, the front door slamming shut behind her like a gunshot. In the car, Clara's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, but her mind was clear, razor-sharp and focused. The papers were proof, a lifeline to pull her out of Travis's web, but she needed more. She needed to hear it from Dorothy again, recorded, undeniable. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over Maya's number, but hesitated. This wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. It was personal, a reckoning she couldn't delegate. She opened a voice recording app instead, testing it with a shaky breath. "April 1st, 2025, she said, her voice steadying. "Clara, Hensley, I'm going back in." She slipped the phone into her jacket pocket, leaving it running, and marched back to the house. Dorothy was still in the living room, hunched over her wine glass, her face a mask of despair. She startled as Clara re-entered, her eyes widening in confusion. "Clara? What?" "Sit down," Clara ordered, her tone brooking no argument. Dorothy obeyed, sinking into the armchair as Clara loomed over her, arms crossed. "You're going to tell me everything. Right now. No half-truths, no tears to dodge the question. Who was Daniel Pierce? What's the trust fund? And what did Travis do with it?" Dorothy's lips quivered, but Clara's glare pinned her in place. "Daniel. He was brilliant," Dorothy began, her voice trembling. "He worked with Elon at XAI, back when it was just starting. We met at a company event in '85. Richard was away, traveling for work, and I was lonely. It was a mistake, an affair. When I found out I was pregnant, Daniel wanted to leave his wife, but I couldn't let that happen. Richard came back and I told him everything. He forgave me, or so I thought. Daniel died in a car accident a month later, before you were born." Clara's chest tightened, a mix of grief and anger swirling inside her. "And the trust fund," she pressed, her voice hard. "Daniel set it up before he died," Dorothy said, wiping at her eyes. $7 million in your name to be released when you turned 21. Richard hated it, called it blood money. He made me promise to keep it quiet, said it'd ruin Travis if you got something he didn't. I agreed. The lawyer locked it away, and we raised you as ours. Until Travis found out," Clara said, her tone flat but laced with venom. "What happened then?" Dorothy's hands twisted in her lap, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He was 16. He overheard me on the phone with the lawyer. something about renewing the trust's confidentiality. He got angry, said it wasn't fair. I begged him not to tell you. He didn't, at first, but later, he started using it. He threatened to expose me if I didn't back him. His startups, his debts. When you left XAI to help him, he said it was perfect. You'd never know, and he'd get everything. Clara's stomach churned, bile rising in her throat. So you let him turn me into a puppet, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You let me kill my career, my life, for a family that wasn't even mine. I didn't want to lose you, Dorothy cried, her voice breaking. I thought if you knew, you'd hate me, leave me. I was weak, Clara. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it, Clara snapped, stepping back as Dorothy reached for her again. She pulled the phone from her pocket, stopping the recording with a trembling finger. 90 minutes of raw confession. More than enough. You chose Travis over me. Every time. I'm done. She turned and left, Dorothy's sobs fading into the distance as she climbed into her car. Her hands shook as she sent the audio file to Maya with a brief message. Got it. Call me. The reply came within seconds. Holy shit, Clara. This is gold. I'm on my way. But Clara couldn't wait. The fury burning in her veins demanded action, and Travis wasn't the only one who'd underestimated her. She drove back to Menlo Park, her mind racing with possibilities. The Hensley Ventures office was dark now, the guard long gone, but she still had her keycard. She slipped inside, her footsteps silent on the polished floor, and headed straight for Travis's office. If he'd known about the trust fund, there might be more. Emails, notes, something to prove he'd planned this all along. The office was as she'd left it. Whiskey glass on the desk, papers strewn haphazardly. She powered up his computer, her heart pounding as the screen flickered to life. The password was easy. Travis H1. The same arrogant simplicity he'd used since high school. She opened his email, scrolling through a flood of messages. Investor pitches, legal threats from XAI, cryptic exchanges with a Chinese contact named Louis. Then she found it. A thread dated January 2025, titled Clara Leverage. Mom's on board, Travis had written to an unknown recipient. She'll keep Clara in the dark. Trust fund stays buried. We use her XAI cred to seal the deal. She's too naive to suspect. The reply was curt. Good. Move fast. Musk's team is sniffing around. Clara's blood ran cold. It wasn't just opportunism. Travis had orchestrated this from the start, with Dorothy's complicity. She forwarded the emails to Maya, her fingers trembling with a mix of triumph and disgust. But as she dug deeper, a new message popped up in Travis's inbox. Sent just minutes ago. It was from his lead lawyer, marked urgent. She's got something. Shut her down before tomorrow's hearing. Her phone buzzed, a text from Travis himself. Drop it, Clara, or I'll ruin you worse than you can imagine. The threat landed like a slap, but it only fueled her fire. She grabbed a USB drive from her bag, downloading the email thread and anything else she could find. Financial records, encrypted files, a memo about Phase 2 with the Chinese buyer. The computer chimed as the transfer finished and she yanked the drive free, her pulse racing. She was halfway to the door when her phone buzzed again, this time a call from an unknown number. Clara Hensley? A man's voice said when she answered, low and unfamiliar. You're digging where you shouldn't. Walk away, or you won't like what comes next. Who is this? She demanded, her voice steady despite the chill creeping up her spine. The line went dead. She stared at the phone, her breath hitching as headlights flared through the office window, 2 cars pulling into the lot below. She didn't wait to see who they were. She bolted for the back stairs, clutching the USB drive as she descended, her footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. She slipped out a side exit just as voices filtered through the building. Harsh, urgent, searching. Clara drove home in a blur, her heart hammering as she locked her apartment door behind her. She called Maya, her voice shaking but firm. I've got more. Emails, threats. They're after me. Stay put, Maya said, her tone clipped. "I'm coming over. We've got enough to bury Travis and whoever's backing him. Tomorrow, we hit them hard." Clara nodded, though Maya couldn't see it, and sank onto her couch, the USB drive and papers spread before her. The truth was hers now. Daniel Pierce, the trust fund, Travis's betrayal, Dorothy's cowardice, but it came with a cost. The headlights, the voice on the phone, they weren't just Travis's desperation. Someone else was watching, someone with power, and they wanted her silenced. She clutched the birth certificate. Daniel's name a quiet anchor in the storm. She'd started this fight to clear her name, but it was bigger now. A war she couldn't back down from, no matter who stood in her way. The San Francisco courtroom buzzed with restless energy on April 15, 2025, as Clara Hensley took her seat beside Maya Torres, her hands clutching the bag of evidence like a lifeline. The air was thick with anticipation, the gallery packed with reporters, tech executives, and curious onlookers, all waiting for the next act in the unfolding drama of XAI Ver Hensley Ventures. Clara's pulse pounded in her ears, a relentless drumbeat fueled by the sleepless night she'd spent poring over the papers from Dorothy's safe and the files from Travis's computer. The USB drive in her pocket held emails that could bury her brother. The recorded confession from her mother was a dagger poised to strike. She'd walked into this fight to clear her name, but now, with the weight of Daniel Pierce's legacy in her hands, it was about justice. Raw, unyielding justice. Travis sat across the aisle, flanked by his team of lawyers, his smirk still intact but fraying at the edges. He hadn't seen Clara since her break-in at his office 2 weeks ago, hadn't heard the recording she'd made with Dorothy, hadn't seen the emails she'd stolen. But he knew something was coming. His sidelong glances betrayed a flicker of unease. Dorothy sat in the gallery, her face pale and drawn, her hands twisting in her lap. Clara avoided her gaze, the sting of betrayal too fresh to soften. Today wasn't about reconciliation. It was about tearing down the lies that had caged her for 39 years. The judge's gavel cracked against the bench, silencing the murmurs. "We'll resume with Mr. Musk's testimony," he announced, his voice stern. Elon Musk stepped forward, his presence a quiet storm in the room. Graying hair tousled, dark suit unbuttoned, eyes sharp as ever. Clara watched him, her chest tightening with a mix of awe and regret. Once he'd been her mentor. Now he was the key to unraveling her brother's crimes. The prosecutor, a wiry man with a clipped beard, adjusted his glasses and began. "Mr. Musk, you submitted additional evidence yesterday. Can you explain its significance?" Elon nodded, his voice calm but edged with steel. "We uncovered a second recording from Hensley Ventures servers, dated March 1, 2025. It confirms Travis Hensley orchestrated the theft of XAI's AI algorithms and attempted to sell them to a foreign entity, specifically a Chinese tech firm known as Zintech. More importantly, it implicates him in a personal deception against Clara Hensley, who I can confirm was never a willing participant in his scheme." The room erupted in a low rumble of gasps and whispers. Travis shifted in his seat, his smirk twitching as his lead lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, leaned in to whisper furiously. Clara's breath caught, her eyes darting to Maya, who mouthed, "Second recording?" Neither of them had known. Elon gestured to the clerk and the speakers crackled to life, Travis's voice spilling into the courtroom, smug, careless, damning. "Clara's out of her depth," he said, a laugh punctuating his words. "She thinks she's saving the family, but she's just a tool. Mom's been sitting on that trust fund for years, Daniel Pierce's money. I told her to keep Clara clueless. Makes her easier to control." The words hit Clara like a physical blow, echoing the venom he'd spat at her in his office. The gallery buzzed louder, reporters scribbling furiously. Dorothy let out a choked sob, her hands flying to her face, but Clara didn't look at her. Her eyes stayed on Travis, watching his facade crack as the recording played on. "We use her XAI cred to get the specs," Travis continued. "Zintech's offering $50 million. They don't care where it comes from. Clara won't suspect a thing until it's done." The audio cut off, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. The judge banged his gavel, but the noise barely pierced the chaos. Clara's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. $50 million. Travis hadn't just stolen from XAI, he'd sold her out for a fortune, all while Dorothy kept her blind. Maya shot to her feet, her voice slicing through the din. "Your Honor, we'd like to present new evidence that corroborates Mr. Musk's testimony and exonerates my client, Clara Hensley." The judge nodded, his expression grim. "Proceed." Clara handed Maya the bag, her movements steady despite the storm raging inside her. Maya approached the bench, laying out the documents with precision. Dorothy's letter, the birth certificate, the trust fund papers. "These are legal records from Dorothy Hensley's personal safe, obtained by my client on April 1st, Maya said, her tone razor-sharp. "They include a birth certificate naming Daniel Pierce as Clara's biological father, a trust fund established in Clara's name worth $7 million, and a letter from Mrs. Hensley instructing an attorney to conceal these facts, dated 1986, the year of Clara's birth." The gallery erupted again, a wave of shouts and gasps crashing over the room. The judge slammed his gavel harder. "Order, order in the court." Maya pressed on, undeterred. "We also have a recording of Travis Hensley, provided by my client from a confrontation on March 31st. In it, he admits to exploiting Clara's ignorance of her origins to manipulate her into supporting Hensley Ventures." The clerk cued the audio Clara had captured in Travis's office, and his voice filled the room again, taunting, cruel. "You're not her daughter, Clara. You're some dirty little secret she buried. Mom made sure you'd never see it." The recording ended with Clara's bitter retort, "You used me," followed by the slam of the door as she'd left. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Travis's face was ashen, his lawyers scrambling to confer. Clara felt a strange calm settle over her. The truth was out, laid bare for the world to see. She'd put it there, and no amount of his smirking could take it back. The prosecutor turned to Elon, his voice steady. "Mr. Musk, did you know Daniel Pierce?" Elon's expression softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability breaking through his intensity. "Yes. Daniel was one of XAI's first engineers. A brilliant mind, stubborn as hell. We worked together in the early days, building the foundations of what we have now. He died in '85, before Clara was born. I didn't know about her until this case. If I had, she'd still be with us at XAI, not caught in this mess." Clara's throat tightened, Elon's words stirring a quiet ache. She'd worked under him, admired him, and now he was tying her to a legacy she'd never known, a legacy Travis had exploited. She met his gaze briefly, seeing not pity but respect, and it steadied her. The judge turned to Travis's team. "Counsel, your response?" Pinstripe stood, his voice shaky but defiant. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the IP theft charges. It's a family matter, personal, not legal." "Irrelevant?" Maya snapped, whirling on him with fire in her eyes. "Travis Hensley used Clara's identity and trust to infiltrate XAI, steal proprietary tech, and frame her as a co-conspirator. It's the backbone of his defense, and it's a lie." "Enough!" The judge rubbed his temples, his patience fraying. "I'll hear from Mrs. Hensley. Approach the stand." Dorothy rose unsteadily, her steps faltering as she crossed the room. She looked small, fragile, a far cry from the woman who'd raised Clara with an iron will veiled in soft words. The bailiff swore her in, and the prosecutor didn't hesitate. "Mrs. Hensley, is it true Clara is Daniel Pierce's daughter?" he asked, his tone firm. Dorothy swallowed hard, tears streaming down her face. "Yes." "And you hid this from her?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought it was best." "Did Travis know?" the prosecutor pressed, stepping closer. She nodded, her hands clutching the stand. He found out years ago. He said it didn't matter, that Clara didn't need to know. Did he use it to manipulate her? Dorothy hesitated, her eyes darting to Clara, pleading for forgiveness Clara couldn't give. Yes, she admitted, her voice barely audible. He did. The courtroom exploded. Shouts, gasps, the judge's gavel pounding like thunder. Clara's heart raced, her mother's confession a knife twisting deeper with every word. She couldn't stay seated any longer. She stood, her voice cutting through the chaos, raw and unfiltered. "Why, Mom?" she demanded, her tone trembling with fury and pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dorothy flinched, gripping the stand for support. "I was ashamed, Clara. Daniel and I. It was a mistake. Richard forgave me, but he hated that trust fund. He made me promise to keep it quiet. When Travis found out, he said it'd ruin us if you knew. I believed him." "You believed him over me?" Clara said, her voice breaking as tears welled in her eyes. "I gave up everything for you, for him, and you let him destroy me." "I'm sorry," Dorothy sobbed, her words lost in the swell of noise. But it was too late. The apology rang hollow, drowned by years of deceit. Travis shot to his feet, his composure shattering. "This is a setup," he yelled, his voice hoarse with desperation. "She's lying. They're all lying. I didn't do anything wrong." "Sit down, mister." "Hensley," the judge barked, his gavel slamming again. "You'll have your turn." But Travis didn't sit. He pointed at Clara, his face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? You're nothing, Clara. Nothing." The bailiff moved fast, tackling Travis before he could lunge, pinning him to the floor as he thrashed and cursed. The gallery screamed, cameras flashing in a frenzy. Maya pulled Clara back, her arm firm around her shoulders. "It's over," she said, her voice steady. "He's done." Clara watched as Travis was dragged away, his shouts fading as the doors slammed shut behind him. The judge called for order, his voice strained, but Clara barely heard it. Her eyes drifted to Elon, who stood silently at the prosecution table, his gaze fixed on her with a quiet intensity. Then to Dorothy, crumpled at the stand, a broken figure she no longer recognized. The truth had torn them all apart. Travis's greed, Dorothy's cowardice, her own blindness, but Clara had struck the blow that mattered. She'd exposed them, laid their sins bare, and though the fight wasn't over, she felt the first flicker of victory ignite within her. The judge cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the lingering chaos. "We'll recess until tomorrow. I expect decorum when we return." Clara sank back into her seat as the room emptied, her hands trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Maya squeezed her shoulder, her voice low. "We've got him, Clara. Tomorrow we finish it." Clara nodded, her jaw tight. Travis was down, but not out. Not yet. The emails, the threats, the shadowy figure on the phone, they loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. She'd won this round, but the war was far from over, and she'd be ready when it came crashing down. Clara Hensley stood tall in the San Francisco courtroom, her voice ringing out with a clarity that silenced the murmurs. "I'm here because they don't get to win, not after what they've done. Travis didn't just steal from XAI, he stole from me, used me like a pawn in his game. And my mother—" Her gaze flicked to Dorothy, who flinched under the weight of it. "She let him. She hid the truth about my father, about who I am, to protect him. I've lost everything to their greed, but I'm taking it back. Today ends it." She sat, her chest heaving, the room buzzing with the echo of her words. Maya gave her a small, fierce nod, her eyes glinting with pride. The judge turned to Travis's side. "Mr. Hensley, your statement." Travis rose slowly, his movements jerky, his face a mask of barely contained fury. He gripped the table's edge, his knuckles white, and glared at Clara before speaking. "This is a witch hunt," he spat, his voice hoarse. "She's lying, twisting everything to make me the villain. I built Hensley Ventures from nothing. Clara was part of it, Willing or not, she was there. You can't pin this on me alone. And that trust fund nonsense? It's a distraction. They've got no proof, just stories and tears. His words hung in the air, brittle and unconvincing, as he sank back into his seat. The gallery shifted, a ripple of disbelief passing through the crowd. Clara's hands clenched into fists under the table, her nails digging into her palms. Travis's defiance was a desperate flail, but it still stung. His refusal to own even a shred of guilt. The judge rubbed his temples, his patience visibly fraying. "I've heard enough," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "This court has reviewed the evidence, recordings, emails, legal documents, and sworn testimony. The prosecution's case is compelling, corroborated by multiple sources. Mr. Hensley's defense offers no substantive rebuttal, only denial. On the charges of intellectual property theft, fraud, and conspiracy, I find Travis Hensley guilty on all counts. Sentencing will be scheduled for next month. As for Clara Hensley, the court finds no credible evidence of her involvement. She is cleared of all charges." A gasp swept through the room, followed by a roar of chatter. Clara's breath caught, a wave of relief crashing over her, tempered by the fire still burning in her chest. She'd won, her name was clear, but the victory felt incomplete, the wound too raw. Travis slumped in his chair, his head dropping into his hands while his lawyers scrambled to confer, their voices a frantic buzz. Dorothy sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking, but Clara didn't look at her. She couldn't, not yet. Elon Musk stood then, his movement drawing every eye in the room. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady and commanding, "if I may, I have one more piece of evidence to submit. It's relevant to Clara Hensley's case and the broader implications of Travis's actions." The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Musk." Elon stepped forward, holding a slim folder, his expression grave. "Last night, XAI's security team intercepted a data breach attempt on our servers, traced back to a proxy linked to Zintech, the same firm Travis Hensley conspired with. But there's more. We found this, a letter from Daniel Pierce, dated 2 weeks before his death in 1985, addressed to me." He opened the folder, pulling out a yellowed page, and began to read. "Elon, if anything happens to me, look after my kid. I've set up a trust, $7 million for her future. Dorothy's scared, but she'll do right by her. Don't let it get buried." The room went still, the weight of the words settling like dust after an explosion. Clara's heart stopped, her eyes locking onto Elon as he continued. "I didn't know about Clara until this lawsuit. Daniel was my friend, one of the best minds I ever worked with. He died in a car accident, and I assumed Dorothy had honored his wishes. She didn't. Travis knew about the trust and used it to control her, to control Clara. This isn't just theft, it's a betrayal of a man's dying wish." He handed the letter to the clerk, his gaze shifting to Clara. "I failed Daniel once by not checking. I won't fail him again. Clara, that trust fund is yours. XAI's legal team will ensure it's released with interest. It's closer to $10 million now." Clara's breath hitched, tears welling in her eyes, not from sadness but from a strange, fierce gratitude. $10 million. Daniel's gift, her father's legacy, stolen from her for decades. She nodded at Elon, unable to speak, the enormity of it sinking in. The gallery erupted again, cameras flashing, but the judge's gavel was a distant thud against the storm in her mind. Travis shot to his feet, his face red with rage. "This is bullshit," he roared, shoving past his lawyer. "You're all in on it. Musk, Clara, the whole damn system. I won't let you—" He lunged across the aisle, his hands outstretched toward Clara, his eyes wild with desperation. The courtroom exploded. Screams, shouts, the bailiffs rushing forward. Clara flinched, but Maya yanked her back, her chair scraping against the floor. The bailiffs tackled Travis mid-stride, slamming him to the ground as he thrashed and cursed, his voice a guttural snarl. "You'll pay for this, Clara. You'll pay." The judge pounded his gavel, his voice booming. Order! Remove the defendant, now! The bailiffs dragged Travis out, his struggles fading as the doors slammed shut behind him. Clara's chest heaved, her hands trembling as Maya steadied her. "He's gone," Maya said, her tone fierce. "He can't touch you now." Clara nodded, her gaze drifting to Dorothy, who sat crumpled in the gallery, her face buried in her hands. The prosecutor approached the judge, his voice cutting through the lingering chaos. "Your Honor, given Mr. Hensley's behavior and the severity of the charges, we request he be held without bail pending sentencing." "Granted," the judge said, his tone final. "Mr. Hensley will remain in custody. Court is adjourned until sentencing." The room began to empty, reporters swarming the exits, their voices a cacophony of speculation. Clara stayed seated, her mind reeling. Travis was guilty, locked away, temporary but real. Her name was clear, her father's legacy restored. Elon approached, his expression softer now, almost apologetic. "You didn't deserve this," he said, his voice low. "Daniel would have been proud. Hell, I'm proud. You've got a place at XAI if you want it. Senior role, your pick." Clara met his gaze, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Thank you, Elon. I'll think about it." He nodded and stepped back, leaving her with Maya. Dorothy rose from the gallery, her steps hesitant as she approached. "Clara," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Don't," Clara cut her off, standing to face her. "You had your chance to tell me. Decades of chances. You chose Travis, chose your lies. I don't want to hear it now." Dorothy's face crumpled, but she didn't argue, turning away as sobs shook her frail frame. Clara watched her go, a pang of guilt flickering in her chest, but it was drowned by the certainty of her choice. She'd lost a mother today, but she'd gained something greater: truth, freedom, a name. The San Francisco courtroom emptied in a rush of footsteps and murmurs on April 16, 2025, leaving Clara Hensley seated at the defendant's table, her hands still trembling from the storm that had just broken. Travis was gone, dragged away in cuffs after his violent outburst, his threats echoing in her ears. "You'll pay." The judge's ruling, guilty on all counts, Clara cleared, hung in the air like a hard-won exhale. But the victory felt raw, jagged around the edges. Maya Torres lingered beside her, gathering papers with a quiet efficiency, her presence a steady anchor as the room's chaos faded. "You okay?" Maya asked, her voice soft but probing, her dark eyes searching Clara's face. Clara nodded, though the motion felt mechanical. "I don't know what I am," she admitted, her voice hoarse from shouting and unshed tears. "It's over, but it doesn't feel finished." Maya set the folder down, resting a hand on Clara's shoulder. "It's not supposed to. Not yet. You just tore your whole world apart and put it back together in 3 weeks. Give it time." Time. Clara wasn't sure she had the luxury. The past hour had rewritten her life, Travis convicted, her name restored, Daniel Pierce's trust fund reclaimed, but the pieces didn't fit neatly. She glanced at the gallery, now nearly empty, where Dorothy had sat, her sobbing figure a ghost that lingered in Clara's mind. She'd walked away from her mother, from the family she'd once bled for, but the weight of that choice pressed down on her, heavy and unresolved. Outside, the cool April air hit her like a slap as she stepped onto the courthouse steps, Maya at her side. Reporters swarmed, their questions a barrage. "Clara, how do you feel about the verdict? What's next for you? Any comment on your brother's outburst?" But Maya waved them off with a sharp, "No statements," guiding Clara to her car. The drive to her Palo Alto apartment was silent, the hum of the engine filling the void where words failed. When they arrived, Maya followed her inside, dropping onto the couch with a sigh. "You've got a hell of a story now," Maya said, kicking off her heels. "Tech heist, family secrets, courtroom brawl, Hollywood's going to come knocking." Clara managed a weak laugh, sinking into an armchair. "I'd rather they didn't. I just want quiet, normal, whatever that is. Normal's overrated, Maya replied, smirking. But quiet, you've earned that. Quiet didn't come easily, though. Over the next week, the world spun on without pause. Travis's sentencing was set for May 15th, and the press painted him as Silicon Valley's latest fallen star. Headlines screaming, "Tech prodigy turned traitor," and "Hensley sibling feud ends in jail." Clara avoided the noise, unplugging her TV and silencing her phone, but the fallout crept in. Lawyers from XAI contacted her about the trust fund, confirming Elon's promise. $10 million adjusted for decades of interest would be hers within weeks. It was a fortune, a lifeline from a father she'd never known, but it felt like a stranger's gift, not a triumph. Dorothy called twice, leaving voicemails Clara couldn't bring herself to play. The third time, a letter arrived, handwritten, the envelope trembling in Clara's hands as she opened it. "Clara," it began, Dorothy's script shaky but legible. "I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Not just for hiding Daniel, but for letting Travis use you. I was afraid of losing you, of breaking what little we had left after Richard died. I failed you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I love you." Clara read it once, then folded it into a drawer, her chest tight with a mix of anger and something softer she couldn't name. She wasn't ready. Not to forgive, not to forget. The real blow came 10 days later when Maya arrived at Clara's apartment with a grim expression and a thick file. "We've got a problem," she said, dropping the file onto the coffee table. "Travis isn't done." Clara frowned, her stomach sinking. "He's in jail. What can he do?" Maya opened the file, revealing a stack of legal documents and a grainy photo of a man in a dark suit, his face obscured. "He's not acting alone," she said. "The emails you pulled from his computer, those Zintech contacts, they're not happy. Travis promised them XAI's tech, and now they're out $50 million in a competitive edge. This guy," she tapped the photo, "showed up at Hensley Ventures last week, asking questions. Security footage caught him. And then there's this." She slid a page toward Clara, a motion filed by Travis's lawyers claiming new evidence of Clara's complicity in the theft, demanding a retrial. "It's bullshit," Maya said, her voice sharp. "A last-ditch play to drag you back in. But it's got teeth. Someone's funding it, and I'd bet it's Zintech." Clara's hands clenched, the fragile piece she'd grasped slipping away. "He's still trying to ruin me," she said, her voice low and bitter. "Even now." "He's desperate," Maya replied. "But we've got the upper hand. Your recording, the emails, Elon's testimony. I'll bury this motion before it gets legs. Still, you need to watch your back. That call you got, the headlights at the office, it wasn't just Travis." The warning settled over Clara like a cold fog. She nodded, her jaw tight, and Maya left with a promise to handle the legal mess. Alone, Clara pulled Daniel's letter from her bag, the one Elon had read in court, tracing his words. "Look after my kid. Don't let it get buried." The ache of his absence mingled with a fierce pride. He'd trusted Elon to protect her, and now, in a way, he had. She tucked the letter away, her resolve hardening. Travis wouldn't win. Not again. 2 weeks later, on May 1st, Clara met with XAI's legal team to finalize the trust fund transfer. The process was swift, the paperwork a blur of signatures and notary stamps. $10 million, a number that felt unreal, landed in her account, a tangible link to Daniel Pierce. She didn't celebrate. Instead, she drove to a quiet park in Palo Alto, sitting on a bench with the folder of evidence beside her. The money was freedom, but it couldn't erase the scars. Travis's betrayal, Dorothy's silence, the life she'd lost. That evening, Elon called, his voice crackling through her phone. "Clara, it's done. The trust's yours. You still thinking about coming back?" She hesitated, the offer tempting but heavy. "I am," she said. I need a minute to figure out who I am now." "Fair enough," he replied, a rare warmth in his tone. Doors open when you're ready. Daniel would have liked that. The call ended, and Clara stared at the darkening sky. Elon's words echoing Dorothy's letter, Travis's threats, Daniel's plea. She wasn't the woman who'd left XAI 2 years ago, nor the sister who'd propped up Travis's dreams. She was something new, forged in fire, tempered by truth. The next day, she signed a contract with XAI, a senior data lead role, a fresh start, her hand steady as she wrote her name. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Travis's sentencing came on May 15th, and Clara didn't attend. Maya went in her place, texting updates. 15 years, no parole chance for 10. Zintech motion denied. Judge laughed it out of court. Clara read the message on her balcony, a glass of wine in hand, the Silicon Valley skyline glittering below. The evil was punished. Travis locked away, his empire dust, but the good wasn't fully rewarded yet. She'd won, but peace was a work in progress. She pulled out Daniel's letter again, reading it under the soft glow of a lamp. Don't let it get buried. She wouldn't. She'd buried enough. Her trust, her family, her old self. Now, she'd build something new, not for them, but for her. Maya arrived an hour later, dropping onto the couch with a triumphant grin. He's done, Maya said, raising an imaginary glass. You're free now. Don't look back. I won't, Clara replied, clinking her wineglass against the air. I'm done carrying them. The night stretched on. Quiet settling. The night stretched on. Quiet settling over her like a blanket. Travis was gone. Dorothy a fading shadow. The lawsuit a closed chapter. Clara stood on her balcony, the city alive beneath her, and felt the first stirrings of calm. Not full peace, not yet, but a start. She'd lost a family, but she'd found a legacy. Daniel's fire, her own strength, and that was enough to carry her forward. The summer sun blazed over Silicon Valley on July 15, 2025, casting long shadows across the XAI campus in Mountain View as Clara Hensley pulled into the parking lot. 3 months had passed since Travis's sentencing. 3 months since the courtroom chaos had faded into memory, and today marked her second month back at XAI, not as the junior analyst she'd once been, but as a senior data lead, helming a project that bore her fingerprints. The air was warm, thick with the scent of eucalyptus and ambition, and Clara stepped out of her car with a quiet confidence she hadn't known before. The weight of the past, Travis's betrayal, Dorothy's lies, the lawsuit, still lingered, but it was lighter now, a scar rather than an open wound. The XAI headquarters thrummed with its usual energy, glass walls reflecting the sky, engineers darting between labs, screens flickering with neural network simulations. Clara's badge, Clara Hensley, senior data lead, swung from her lanyard as she crossed the lobby, a tangible symbol of her reclamation. She'd signed the contract in May, a decision born not of desperation, but of choice, and every day since had felt like a step toward something new. The receptionist, a young woman with a bright smile, waved her through. Lab 4, Miss Hensley, your team's waiting. Clara nodded, her footsteps steady on the polished floor as she headed to her workspace. Lab 4 was a hive of activity. Whiteboards scrawled with algorithms, monitors humming with data streams, her team of 10 engineers poring over the latest iteration of their project, a predictive AI model for renewable energy grids. It was ambitious, messy, the kind of challenge she'd once thrived on, and now it was hers to shape. She dropped her bag by her desk, joining the group as they debated a coding snag, her voice cutting through the chatter with calm authority. Recalibrate the input weights, she said, tapping the screen. The variance is off. Too much noise from the solar data. Let's run it again with a tighter filter. Her lead coder, a wiry man named Raj, grinned. You've got an eye for this, boss. 2 steps ahead, as usual. Clara returned the smile, small but genuine. Learned from the best, she said, though she didn't name Daniel Pierce aloud. His legacy lived in her now, a quiet fire she felt in every line of code she wrote. The day unfolded in a blur of work, meetings, simulations, a quick lunch of sushi from the cafeteria with Raj and Priya, an old friend from her first XAI stint. Priya, her purple-streaked hair a splash of color against the lab's sterile white, nudged Clara as they ate. "You're different now," she said, popping a piece of tuna into her mouth. "Not just tougher, freer. It suits you." Clara paused, her chopsticks hovering over her plate. "Freer," she echoed, testing the word. "Yeah, I guess I am." She'd moved to a new apartment in San Jose in June, a airy loft with big windows and a balcony overlooking the city, paid for with a sliver of the $10 million trust fund Daniel had left her. The rest she'd invested, half in tech stocks, half in a scholarship fund for women in STEM, a nod to the father she'd never known. The money hadn't changed her, not the way Travis's greed had changed him, but it had given her space to breathe, to build a life unburdened by the past. Dorothy's shadow lingered, though. The letter from May sat unread in a drawer, joined by two more that had arrived since. Pleas for forgiveness Clara couldn't face. She'd deleted the voicemails, too, her finger hovering over the play button before pressing erase. One evening in late June, Dorothy had shown up at her old Palo Alto address, leaving a note with the landlord when Clara wasn't there. "I just want to see you, please." Clara had found it crumpled in her mailbox when she'd stopped by to clear out the last of her things, and she'd stood there, staring at the words, her chest tight with a tangle of grief and resolve. She hadn't called back. She wasn't ready, might never be. Travis's absence was a different kind of silence. His 15-year sentence had held, the Zintech motion dismissed as a desperate ploy, and the press had moved on to fresher scandals. Clara hadn't visited him, hadn't written, hadn't cared to hear his inevitable excuses. Maya had kept tabs reporting that he'd tried to smuggle a letter out of jail, a rant blaming Clara for his downfall, but it had been intercepted. "He's a ghost now," Maya had said over coffee one weekend, her tone final. "Let him stay that way." Clara had nodded, sipping her latte. "He's not my burden anymore." July brought clarity, a slow unfurling of peace. Her work at XAI consumed her days, the project gaining traction. Early tests showed a 20% improvement in grid efficiency, earning a rare email from Elon. "Good work, Clara. Daniel would have loved this." The words had hit her harder than she'd expected, a quiet validation that lingered as she read them late at night, alone with a glass of wine and the hum of the city below. On July 20th, a Saturday, Clara drove to Twin Peaks, a lookout high above San Francisco she'd visited once before, after the trial. The fog had burned off, leaving the city sprawled out in sharp relief. Golden Gate Bridge a crimson slash against the bay, the skyline glittering under a cloudless sky. She parked and climbed to the summit, the wind tugging at her jacket, cool against her skin. She stood there, hands in her pockets, the folder with Daniel's letter tucked under her arm, a ritual she hadn't planned but felt right. She pulled out the letter, unfolding it carefully, and read his words again. "Look after my kid. Don't let it get buried." The wind rustled the paper, and Clara traced his signature with her fingertip, imagining the man who'd written it, a brilliant engineer, a friend to Elon, a father she'd never meet. She'd lost so much to Travis's greed, Dorothy's cowardice, her career, her family, her innocence. But she'd found this, a legacy, a name, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Maya. "Dinner tonight, celebrating you surviving this hell year." Clara smiled, typing back, "You're on. Thai place, 7?" She slipped the phone away, turning her attention back to the city below. Dorothy's last letter had arrived that morning, a simple card with 3 words. "I miss you." Clara had stared at it over breakfast, her coffee growing cold, and left it on the counter unanswered. She didn't hate her mother, not anymore, but the bridge between them was ash, and she wasn't ready to rebuild it. Footsteps crunched behind her, and Clara turned to see Elon Musk approaching, his hands in his pockets, his expression casual but deliberate. She blinked, startled. "Elon, what are you doing here?" "Saw your car," he said, nodding toward the lot below. "I come up here sometimes. Clears the head. Figured you might too." Clara relaxed, a small laugh escaping her. "It does. Didn't expect company, though." He stepped beside her, gazing out at the skyline. "You're doing good work back at XAI," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "That grid model, it's got teeth. Daniel would have been all over it." The mention of her father warmed her, a quiet glow in her chest. "Thanks," she said. "I feel him in it sometimes, like he's guiding me." Elon nodded, a rare softness in his eyes. "He was a stubborn bastard. Never let a problem rest. You've got that in you. A Pierce through and through." Clara smiled, the words settling over her like a mantle. "I'm trying to live up to it." "You are," he said, clapping her shoulder briefly before stepping back. "Keep it up. See you Monday." He walked off, leaving her alone again, the wind carrying his footsteps away. Clara turned back to the view, Daniel's letter still in her hand. She didn't need Travis's approval, Dorothy's love, or anyone's validation to stand here, whole. She'd fought for this, her name, her work, her peace, and won it, not through revenge, but through rebuilding. She folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket, taking one last look at the city. "I'm enough," she said aloud, the words caught by the breeze, and for the first time, they felt true. The drive home was quiet, the windows down, the future stretching out like the open road ahead. Travis was a memory, Dorothy a choice she'd left behind, and Clara. Clara was free, her own anchor, her own light.